Okay. So I'm recording now, so please repeat anything for the record you want repeated.
All right. Well, okay. Then welcome everybody. It looks like we're. I don't see anyone new, right? And I hope I'm not wrong. But if you're first time in this meeting, please override me and say hi. All right. So we were just starting with Rodrigue that was describing what's new in the last couple of weeks. So Rodrigue, do you want to
Yep,
do
sure.
that?
So I looked through the recently merged PRs. I think the two significant of note are the API key related change. This prevents the API key from being provided for all actions unless they request opt into it on deliberately. This is a security mechanism, so functions that shouldn't have the key won't get them. Let me see, that PR number is, I have to find the PR number. One moment.
Yeah, if you give me the PR number, then that'll help me. I can fill in the notes and provide the links that Bertrand asked for.
Right, add an annotation. So this is PR 4284. Another PR that was merged just when I was doing HTTP Nginx related cleanup. When you do a deployment of OpenWhisk, want to provide your own SSL certificates. I tripped over this. I found that we had some old remnants of an HTTP port, which we never enabled. So I forced all HTTP requests to HTTPS. This is PR 4329. Vincent had a PR to enable Jenkins in our deployment. And so part of that was adding a private registry, and that's PR 4356. There's several open PRs, 23 right now, several labeled for review. There's one on the OW performance tool that I think I've gone through, and absent any additional input, I will just go ahead and merge that sometime this week or maybe today. Tyson last week described the invoker back pressure work that he's doing. That's still ongoing. That PR is 4326. Still has a WIP label on it, work in progress. And Chetan has his PR for Cosmos cache invalidation. That's PR 4314, which requires a review. I, for one, have not gone through it yet, but I'll try to do that. That's it, I think.
Thank you, Rodrigue. And I guess maybe it's worth calling out that we're talking about graduation, right? Yay. We have the email thread.
I'll say a few words. I mean, there's a thread that Dave started, and thankfully, because he's kind of leading a last push to try and, not that it's a requirement for graduation, but he's trying to get us to have a unified release. And so I'm glad I want everyone to build on that thread. I'm glad he started it. You saw what I commented, hopefully. And I got a little emotional writing my response. You couldn't tell. But I'm proud of this project and what we've done. And I want everyone to be able to chime in and with confidence and add their plus ones. So please encourage your colleagues to do so. I'd love to have the thread when I show it to the incubator board and to the Apache board, by the way, that have as many committers and stuff on that thread as possible endorsing graduation. And the last thing I said I was doing is, if you look at the CWiki, you'll see me progressing throughout the day yesterday, filling out the maturity model. I've got 2 small tables to fill out today. I'll finish, and then that'll be done. So that's the last artifact that we would present to the incubator board, kind of as a checklist. I understand they're working on a new checklist, but I haven't seen it yet. And then we'll see about the trademark stuff. If the board knows we're serious about graduation, hopefully they'll sign the documents, and then we're on our way.
This is awesome. Thank you, Matt, and thank you, Dave, for starting this. All right, let's move on with the agenda for today. So, so far I have Vincent doing something, presenting us about Jenkins and OpenWhisk. I have Preeti showing us Knative runtimes, and then James that wants to show a web action as HTTP proxy, right? So it's like this is what we have so far for today. So we have plenty of time. Vincent, do you want to start?
Yes, thank you, guys. Okay, I can share my screens. I had a chart available here, giving folks the current status of the Jenkins pipeline. What I have gone through, including following steps. As we all know, we have 3 virtual machines as a compute resource in Apache available for OpenWhisk deployment and the test. I asked the Apache community, the infra team, to give me the root access. Of course, the username for me will be my Apache ID, and if anyone who is interested to gain those kind of access, please reach out to the infra team with your Apache ID. And here is a Slack channel, as I have written this chart, to reach out to them. You can either open a Jira ticket or directly contact Gavin for this kind of issues. But make sure that you have your own public key config in this apache.org site. And all the virtual machines in Apache has been managed by this OPIE, which is a kind of mechanism to avoid typing your plain password each time when you're trying to do the sudo command. If you can refer to this document, the link over here for more details. Okay. So next, I have already created a username called OpenWhisk for these 3 virtual machines. This is a username that OpenWhisk deployment, especially Ansible, will use to do SSH access among all these virtual machines. And I already done that. And this user, OpenWhisk, had already granted the root access. I already done that. For the Ansible environment, I have already submitted PR to our OpenWhisk repo. And here is the topology I am going to use to deploy the service on top of these 3 virtual machines. I'm going to use a virtual machine 1. The label is actually called OpenWhisk 1. The VM1 actually means OpenWhisk 1 is where I'm going to deploy the deep controller and all the other major services except the invoker. OpenWhisk 2, I'm going to deploy 1 invoker, and virtual machine 3, I'm going to deploy the 2nd invoker. So generally speaking, this is how it looks like. And the access to the private key has already been configured. So when we log on these machines and switch to the user OpenWhisk, we can do SSH access to the other 2. So this is how I've been configured with these 3 virtual machines. And then this is the link, as you can see over here. This is kind of freestyle project. It's called OpenWhisk -test-pipeline. Here is how it looks. I took a snapshot over here, and what I encourage folks to do is to click on this kind of link and try to see if you can do build with parameter, whether you can do build with parameter, and whether you can do the config. So we can have general idea that what kind of access you have. Since I have the, I think it's kind of the mean access, so I can config and can build with a kind of pipeline. And currently, this project is built in manual mode only. because we the instance we launched, we can only launch one instance at a time so far, because we only have these kind of 3 virtual machines. I use one as controller, the other 2 as the place to deploy invokers. And one more thing I have done is I also created and launched a private Docker registry service. Well, the purpose is that when we download the source code on one machine, for our case, it's OpenWhisk 1 or virtual machine 1, and we build it on this guy, and the images can be accessed by the other 2. So that's the purpose that we set up this kind of private Docker registry service. And after I run multiple times our deployments, our tests, and there's one test case constantly failing all the time. I have a log over here. It's a action limits test case, and it constantly failed. We also see some other test cases randomly failed, but this guy is the one constantly failed. Not sure this is an issue that we should attend to, and so folks can take a look at it. And something else, something else interesting. I wrote an instruction already. Here, I just wrote it like yesterday. Like how to maintain the Jenkins pipeline for OpenWhisk. It's currently available in Medium, and I have a request to publish in our OpenWhisk channel. So, folks, and take a look. It contains all the detailed information about how to maintain the Jenkins job. I think that's all from me. So, any other questions for me?
I have one. This is looking very nice. Vincent, so the Jenkins agent runs on all 3 VMs, or it's just on VM1?
It's on one.
Okay.
It's on one, and the other 2 I use them as the place to deploy invoker. So it's invoker on, let's say, virtual machine 2, invoker on virtual machine 3, and all the other services on virtual machine 1.
Okay. Cool.
What triggers a build? Are we going to make Jenkins run on every pull request?
Well, so far we triggered manually by specifying the let's see if you can see my screen, by specifying the fork repository and branch name to trigger the build, because we only run one pipeline instance at a time at this moment. We cannot run 2 in parallel at the same time.
Okay, it'll be nice to add maybe some automation later, so that we can trigger a build on a PR when we think it's necessary, and it would potentially get queued, but
yeah, it will be killed. The hassle is that it will definitely be killed.
This is great. Thanks.
Yeah. Hi, Vincent. I have one, or maybe something we can enhance it to general users. So currently, if I see that it is specific to the VMs which are provisioned in the Apache org, right? What I was thinking is if we can have that Jenkins file more generic, so that any user can use it on a distributed environment.
Okay. The problem is that we really had limited resources so far on the Apache
No, yeah, means like let's say if I'm if I want to have a distributed environment in my own systems, then we can enhance it in that way. So that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think yeah, definitely we can improve that. Folks can have their own deployment and have their own environment to test.
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. Do you mean that we?
So I mean, I think that Niraj, can you submit your idea to the dev list so to better understand it and discuss it there?
Yeah, sure, I will do that.
Okay. Any other questions? All right. Vincent, are you showing anything else?
No.
No. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Preeti, you're next.
Sure. Thank you. Let me share my screen. Okay. So I think last week or a week back, we submitted this under DevTools, since it's kind of experimental and still evolving. So this is where the Knative build that we have been working on lately, and it has all the README and a lot of information, basically a lot of documentation. So I just want to walk you through exactly what it is and how you run it. So for this, we need Kubernetes 113, and this is the prerequisite. And directly jumping into the README. So I'll show you exactly how we can run an OpenWhisk action using the Node.js runtime on Knative. And this is, let me, so I have the, so this can be, we have tested on Docker for desktop and also on Minikube. And for some reason, my machine doesn't behave when I run on Docker for desktop. So I'm running on Minikube right now. So I have 113 Minikube, the Kubernetes and my nodes. And I already have the Knative build, Knative serving, and Istio configured, and it's running. This is where the prerequisites, it's there in the README. These are the prerequisites.
And I'll say, I think our README and prerequisites are actually better than the Knative documentation.
Yeah. And so I'll start with, so basically the way it works is we have a Docker secret YAML. So basically the credentials for pulling or pushing the Docker images to Docker Hub. And on Knative, we need the service account. So I already have both of those deployed. And the instructions are there on the README service account. And the service account that we use, it's already deployed. It's pretty much with Knative, everything is kubectl apply-f and the file name, the YAML file. So, and let's see. I don't have anything else running right now. I'll start with applying the build template, which is under runtimes JavaScript. And the build template, it has all the details, as in all the specification and where is the Docker file and where to push. This is also in the GitHub repo. So this is what we are kind of applying. This is the build template. Now let's check whether, so we have the build template. After that, so this is the base basically for the Node.js runtime. Now, this is a common prerequisite. Now for deploying any Hello World application or any other application, we need to do these kind of settings. And now let's go into the so we are directly jumping onto the Hello World example. So here, I don't have any pods running. I'm going to apply my, so let me go back to the, so here there are a lot of tests. And the test has build YAML template. And we need to generate the build YAML file. That is basically, we just need to replace the Docker username. And the command is also on GitHub. I have already generated one. So my build YAML looks something like this. So here, there are multiple ways here again to specify what the Hello World code, action code looks like. So one way is through the build template, the build file. And if I apply this.
So for commentary, so basically this is what I call baked in my presentation that goes on with this, and it's checked into the repo. So in Kubernetes Knative, we're basically just building services. And so we're taking the base runtime image source code for Node.js, and we're using the build to build our function into it and create a standalone runtime that with that function baked in. It's not a stem cell, it's a dedicated image for that function. That's typically what Knative supports. So we're putting, so this is the first method Pretty's describing.
Right. And one more way of deploying this is basically just deploy the base image, and then you basically add the action code. And
we call that the stem cell, so we can actually deploy it without a function, and then we have a workaround to use a single endpoint to perform the init and run. So that's the method. So we have two methods of deploying / invoking.
So hopefully this, so the first time it takes a little bit of, basically it's building the whole entire image. But for the subsequent runs, it's pretty easy. Pretty fast.
You mean when, even if you change the code, or if...
Yes, even if you change the code.
Yeah, because
so,
the image has to be cached the first time by kube. So once the base image is cached, then it doesn't have to go fetch it from registry.
Okay, is it cached on all nodes? Or we don't know where
I'm not sure how the caching works in Kubernetes proper. I assume it's very efficient and caches it on all possible nodes where it can.
It caches on the node that pulled it.
Yeah.
So we have the build template and the build. We have the pod.
So I see what, Dragos, you're thinking about what we talked about before, is having a control plane and having pools of invokers and things. So that's an extra little efficiency that you'd have to add something to do.
So after we finish the build, we need to run the service. Basically, what service does is it just pulls that particular image that we have baked in the source and makes it available to us via pod. So this is a very simple service. Again, I have the I've basically updated for my username. So I'll just say service YAML. And okay, so it's running. So now to so I have my ingress gateway set to Istio since I'm using that. And for the mini cube, I have this address where I'll be. So the way I need to, so I have it written down here. So basically what happens is you specify the host. Now the way we get that is, so we have that host here, the service, and also the route has it, the domain name.
Mm-hmm.
And based on that domain name, this is how it works. Now the alternate way of handling this is, like I mentioned, that instead of baking in the action code, let's try to not bake in and with so let's say if I change my build file. So I'll be running a separate one more example. And so I have right now 2 pods running. Build.yaml. So this is with the params. Okay, we'll go for
Pretty, are you speaking?
yeah, it's no, not right now.
Okay.
Yeah, it's let's see what happens. It's unchanged, yes, because it's not. So I'm trying to show you exactly how to run without baking in the action code. Let's see, hopefully it's somehow not.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Actually, even if you debug pretty, I think I enjoy when something needs to be debugged.
Well, to be fair, Pretty's had lots of issues in the past few weeks with her deployments. So we'll have to wait a reasonable amount of time, but maybe move forward if we get stuck. You know,
Yeah.
one thing we've noticed in Knative is that there's not a lot of quality control in terms of testing before they produce a release, for one. And specifically, we noticed that even one of their committers from IBM was surprised when we showed him that the assumption was if you changed any part of the YAML configuration file, that it would consider a delta and regenerate the service and resources and stuff. But that's not the case. So any given build, you have to guess at what to change to force Knative to pick it up as a changed template. I talked to Pretty about we should institute the hashing model she instituted in Whisk deploy to detect the delta. But yeah.
Yeah, and sometimes with Knative, it basically keeps on looping under this terminating. Even I deleted manually. It says deleted, but it doesn't actually delete it.
Yeah,
Got it.
And to be fair, when we ask people who use this in IBM, they use a hosted service with pinned versions and things, and none of them are doing it on their desktop. So using a hosted cloud-based service to do it. So they don't run into these issues when you try to run it in Docker Desktop or Minikube, which is kind of interesting.
Interesting. So you have to be lucky to use the right Kubernetes and Knative versions.
Yeah, I mean, our documentation we have there, we basically say what versions we pin to. But even so, I think that Pretty's been in this deleting and installing different things so much that we've found that perhaps Nginx hangs out in a hidden launch D process and sits on port 8080 and a bunch of weird things. Yeah.
Okay, so you still basically cannot correctly control Nginx. Is that what you're saying?
Or somehow about the deletion process, it doesn't. The deletion process doesn't kill everything.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's.
I'm curious, has anyone else seen the G-Cloud serverless CLI? They demoed this at Serverless Boston last week, was it? I haven't seen it publicly announced yet, but it was demoed. I think there's video of that somewhere, although I couldn't find that either just now.
Haven't heard. All I know is there are 3 different groups working on a Knative CLI. So that sounds like one of the 3 that I wasn't aware of. The only one I know that Carlos is pursuing from our group here was with KNCTL, but I don't know why there are 3 competing efforts.
Okay, I think it's stuck somewhere. So basically, this is what I wanted to show. So even with my build file, without having any action baked in, this generates the image, and this is where it pushes. And then when I build it and create the service, and this is how ideally I could access it.
Yeah. So once hearing Pretty's problems, my system has not had as many problems as Pretty's, admittedly. And I can delete and reinstall without problem. So your mileage may vary. Do you want me to show the slides, Pretty, to illustrate what? So I'm going to share my screen. So these are the slides I announced the dev list I checked in. So it'll walk you through the files and kind of what we've done and how we've altered the system. I just can bring up my. So what she was taking you through was the 3 steps: the build template, which tells you how to build, tells Knative how to build from a source image and produce our runtime with either the baked in or stem cell images. The build file, which she was showing before, which basically can override some of the defaults and things in the build template with your specific requirements. This is where you can bake in your function, if you will, and you can export HTTP methods and turn on debug and turn off debug and little things. And you tell it where you want to send the target file to, and as well target image name. And this is what she was trying to show just now, which is in the service itself. You can pass in and build in these values for the parameters that Flow World expects, like name and place. But if she were to show you, what she was trying to show you was actually these payloads. So for Knative, what we've done is you can use, with these images, you can even run them as OpenWhisk images. You can actually run init and run. So you can build them using Knative and run them as if they were init and run with the same entry points we use, endpoints we use in OpenWhisk proper. But what we've done for Knative for single entry point, if you can see this well enough, is we've combined all the data you would get into one shot. So at the web root domain entry point, we pass a init data inside a substructure called a init. We pass activation data in something called activation, and the values are here. Otherwise, we're getting collisions. We had possible collisions. This was our approach.
So where do you pass this, Matt? Do you pass this to a control plane in Kubernetes?
No, you pass it directly to the runtime. So the runtime can be we're trying to push more functionality into the runtime as possible. So the runtime, so we can send it default. So any controller that we create, minimal controller create or migrate to Knative Kubernetes, could use this combined structure in any permutation. So you can send just the init data, and then you can send separately the activation value data. And we've been adding tests to make sure you can do it in multi-steps at the same endpoint. And basically what we do is we have a pipeline we've created, which is shown in the slides, where we basically, on the same port, we take this combined data and we pre-process it on any request. So the request comes in. If there's a init data baked in already, and you send us init data, we send, sorry, we've already been initialized, error. But if we haven't been initialized, then we accept that first one time only and initialize it with that function. And then if it already has an activation and a value payload, a parameter payload, we execute that and pre-process it. So we set up so I created a matrix of all the things we do in the slides. So we handle basic JSON output, and I say where we do things in terms of we support web actions, we move all the OpenWhisk compliant web action stuff into the process environment. Like you said, we showed you how we could, through the build template, you could enable for that runtime, enable it as enable all the HTTP methods. We move all the environment variables that are non-standard, non-standard. We handle query parameters, and we have issues open to work on the remaining things, to work on body parameters. We're planning discussions. We have issues open that we need to discuss how we handle it within the issues and perhaps on the mailing list. Each of these things, because a lot of them will require, you have to pick a way to do this, or if we want to do it at all. And there's certain things we can't do without a control plane, so we noted these two things last. We can't do API keys, and we can't do basically URL mapping. We can't do namespace. You can't handle the OpenWhisk namespace convention, naming conventions, and do mappings from what's assigned by Kubernetes for your domain, your endpoint. So these are things where we need to start having to discuss creating a minimal control plane to work with these runtimes. But this presentation was just uploaded into DevTools in raw format and PDF, so we can use it for discussion. But again, each of these has the issues on the right that pretty migrated over and are in DevTools repo. So if you read these things and have thoughts, feel free to add them to those issues. So, but I know Pretty is going to be working against some of these issues. We're going to talk today after this meeting. And I'll try to help her as well. Once I finish the maturity model, we'll try to knock out as many things as possible. And as we learn things, we'll add to the issues ourselves, what we learn.
Very nice. Thank you very much, Preeti and Matt. A very nice presentation. I'm afraid we may run out of time if we ask questions now. So would you be okay to switch over to James?
Yeah.
And then if we have time?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you. James?
Hey everyone. Okay, let me share my screen and then let's try this. Okay, can people see my screen? Yeah, all right, Joga says, good, so let's crack on. So this is going to be relatively short. I just wanted to show something that I built recently I thought was interesting and shared online, and people seem kind of interested in it before I write a blog post. And it's It's a web action proxy which allows you to run pretty much any normal HTTP web app on OpenWhisk using the Docker support by building a kind of native proxy. And the background to this project was it was kind of an internal customer request who had had a load of kind of very simple stateless, I think it was Flask HTTP apps that very small and kind of stateless, and would naturally would have been a fit for something like a serverless platform, but they were obviously written along before serverless was a thing, and they were looking to see if they could kind of lift and shift these over to Cloud Functions, right? Because other infrastructure services like Kube and Cloud Foundry that could run these were just considered very heavyweight and a bit overkill for what a lot of people have, which is just very simple static APIs and routes and things like that. So I got asked to see if I could prototype something to see if there was anything we could do here. It turns out it kind of went better than I expected. And the kind of background to this comes from other projects that I've seen that try and do this help of taking a traditional web app and allowing you to run it on a serverless platform. So we already have some of these in like OpenWhisk world. We have like the Express.js plugin, which you can take an Express app and it kind of does some stuff in the framework to make it run on OpenWhisk. And there's projects like Claudia.js, which is very popular. Again, basically it's just like a plugin for Express, which takes the routing into the framework and does the kind of proxying. And there's also things like serverless WSGI for Python apps as well, which seems to be pretty popular. And so there's definitely an interest in this area of kind of lifting and shifting apps. But all of those different projects rely on framework plugins. So you have to have a plugin for your framework. And people have built them for like Express.js and Flask. But it's obviously specific to that particular platform. And yeah, it's a bit of a pain to start building plugins for every single framework and maintain them. So with OpenWhisk, I took a kind of different approach because we have Docker support. And what I decided to do is prototype a kind of in-container proxy. Think of this as like a sidecar, right? But except it's running in the same container. And my approach is a bit different. So how it works at the moment is you have to build the app into an image. But within that image, you run two processes. You run the process of the web app, which can then be basically anything, and it just listens on a port that has to not be port 8080 because OpenWhisk uses that, but anything else you can run on. And then I have a little web action proxy that I built using Node.js that I then build into a static binary using this awesome project called Nexi that I found, which is very, very nice. So essentially all that happens is you just build a static binary, use the static binary, and you start both processes. And the binary listens on port 8080. And when the web action requests come in from the platform, it will convert these into a normal HTTP request and just send it to the in-process container with the web app. And whatever the web app returns, then serialized back out as that web action response. So it's kind of just a native pass-through service using Node.js, which allows you to run on the platform. And actually kind of playing around with this with some simple apps, it works really, really well. So I can show you what it looks like when you build it, right? So you build your container, and essentially you just need to expose the proxy port to tell the binary where to talk to, and then you copy the binary in, and then you have a little start script, which probably looks something like this, where you just start both processes together, and they both listen on those ports. You build it, you push it, and then you can start to use it as a normal web app. And so actually I started to play around with this. And I had some examples, which I think are still running, so let's click on them to see if they work. This was a sample Node.js app, an Express app that I found online that just was like a static web page with some routes. You can kind of click around. It serves like CSS files, and it serves JavaScript files and HTML, and it's got some stuff. And it's just a kind of boilerplate Express app that I found on GitHub that I could just run with minimal modifications that I'll kind of talk about in a minute. On Cloud Functions as a web action, which is pretty nice. There's also one I found for Flask. So this was a Flask app that was serving a front end with D3 and then an API. And as you refresh the page, I think you get more random points and plots them in D3 and things like that. But again, this is just boilerplate Flask app I found on GitHub, and with a couple of changes as well to run on Cloud Functions. And for simple stateless apps, it actually works surprisingly well when the startup time is very quick. I did manage to get a full Java app server running, but the cold start was like 14 seconds because Java app servers. So it's probably not recommended. But it was kind of interesting. I could get a full app server running as a kind of an experiment. Now, like, there are some restrictions with this, right? It was kind of an experiment, and to kind of talk about that are important to know. The first, obviously, is that your code has to be baked into an image, and that has to live. If you're going to use something like Cloud Functions, that's to live on Docker Hub, right? Which might not be ideal for you. Obviously, if you're running OpenWhisk yourself, you can just use your private registry. Hopefully, one day we'll get, maybe get private registry support in OpenWhisk. But I did have an idea for an extension, which I kind of put down the bottom, which is actually you could, again, use the run method or the init method to inject the app into the runtime app runtime if it's small enough to fit under the archive, because we can just, again, take the archive file and extract it for you, which is something we could do, just kind of get around that. But in terms of other kind of important things to be aware of, right? Obviously, we're limited by the request and response size limits of web actions and OpenWhisk, which is like a megabyte by default on the project and 5 megabytes on Cloud Functions, which is actually not bad, right? That's pretty big, so that's not too much of a problem. The other one was that all your kind of page links and things like that, any URIs you put in the web app, they have to use relative URIs, because it has to be relative to the web action path. So if you have things like /home, it tries to go to like /home on the OpenWhisk host, and then it just dies, right? So as long as you've done that, and that was pretty much the only change I had to make to those web apps, so just hunt through for the links and turn them into relative URIs. That worked. And then obviously you've got like the cold start time is affected by the web app startup time. So when you go and you go in your web browser, right? The web browser can send loads of concurrent requests for all those resources, for CSS files and JavaScript concurrently, and they will probably all be cold start if you haven't got those containers ready. And so, yeah, it works really, really well for short things that load really quickly, and like Express loads pretty fast anyway if you've got not loaded. But if you had a very big web app, it's probably not going to be ideal. And then things, obviously, there's lots of things we can't do with it. Things like WebSockets, any kind of stateful connection stuff like server-side events, we can't support these, and it's not really the idea of this, right? The idea of this was to see if it worked, and it did, and to see how kind of realistic we could help people lift and shift stuff over. It's not to replicate, to be allowed to run WebSphere on OpenWhisk, right? That's not a good idea. So yeah, so you kind of have a look, you want to have a play with it. I had a couple of things down the bottom of things to enhance, but yes, it actually works much better than I expected, especially performance-wise for small apps. I think this is a kind of interesting way, right? I think those projects demonstrate that there is a kind of interest in this, of kind of lifting and shifting simple stuff. It wouldn't be what we necessarily recommend for greenfield projects. And although I've done some kind of early stage testing, I'm sure there's lots of bugs to run into about stuff. So I'd encourage people, if you're interested, to kind of try it out. And if you find bugs when you do, then file issues and we can kind of work on it. But yeah, the actual code itself, there's some examples in here for different apps. So for Java, OpenLiberty, which is a app runtime. For Node with Express and Python about how to get it using those demo apps it did, and it's pretty simple. And the code itself is actually relatively small, right? It's just a bit of JavaScript, and that's pretty much it. I'm just doing a pass through between the web action request parameters and HTTP requests, which I build into a binary using that lovely Nexi tool. So yeah, that's about it. Yeah, if you're interested, have a play. I just thought I'd share it. It got some, people seem interested online, and I think this is a kind of neat way, really highlighting that Docker support in OpenWhisk is an awesome feature and allows us to do some really interesting things that you can't do on other platforms.
This is really awesome. It's really, really cool.
Thanks, Roderick.
Is this did you post a dev list with this link and a little abstract, or?
Not yet. I was going to write a blog post about it, but I will also push it to the dev list. Yes, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I was thinking 14 seconds for a Java cold start isn't so bad. I mean, if you're running on Kubernetes, that's about what you expect anyway.
Good point. Good point. Yeah. That's and once it's running, right? Once it's warm, it's rapid. It's super fast. So yeah, for things that maybe don't matter. I mean, Java app servers aren't the fastest anyway, right? So maybe that doesn't matter.
Right. There's probably some interesting predictive things you could do, like a browser sends an options request. The controller responds with that and then says, well, a request is coming, spin up the container, and tries to hide some latency there.
I think it's also very much runtime dependent. So I was using OpenLiberty, which is a very lightweight Java runtime, but it's still a very full-featured runtime. And I think depending on which app server you use, they probably have quicker startup times than that. One of the things I have to do is, one of the problems you have is that when the Docker, like the image gets run, I have to wait on that app server to like be available. And I just have to I just poll the port to see when the port starts accepting connections. So yeah, that was kind of interesting. But yeah, I think depending on your app server, maybe it might be much quicker than that. But Liberty, although it's very lightweight compared to like WAS, is still a pretty full-featured app server. So yes, maybe using some of the different ones, you wouldn't be even so much of a problem.
This is very cool. So I guess this is a variant instead of deploying a Node.js front end as an action and then another backend as a different action.
The other thing that would really, I guess one of the things we could potentially fix as well is if there was some way to address a web action via a sub host. So instead of having /web action /v1, all that kind of stuff, if there was some way to have that as a bit like your object store bucket where you can refer to it as a host name rather than a subpath, that would really work, because then you could not have to deal with all that relative link nonsense,
right.
And you could then start redirecting domains to it, which is not really going to be possible when it's a subpath. So yeah, I don't know whether that's in plan, but yeah, that would really make it really useful.
So OpenWhisk does actually have that capability. They're documented as vanity domains or vanity URLs. They're in the Web Actions doc. You get that, for example, on the DigitalOcean droplet for OpenWhisk that I talked about last time. So I'm going to take a tour of the examples you shared, and hopefully I can send a link that shows how you get your own custom subdomain that way.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Well, that's the kind of feature request I like, one that's already implemented.
Right.
So yeah, that would, all right, cool. I can talk to the internal team about that, because that would be, I think this then would become actually really useful. Cool. Thanks, Roger.
Thank you very much, James. It looks like we're almost on top of the hour. So can we select the next host for the meeting, which is going to be in April 3rd?
I think Tyson had volunteered last time. But he's not there, so I don't know if we can sign him up.
I can ask him. Or we can ping him on the dev list or Slack.
Right. If he's not willing to do it, I'll fill in.
Thank you, Roderick. All right. Thank you very much. We're finishing 2 minutes earlier. Thanks again for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of the day.